This is FIBA Podcast. Thank you for joining us in our morning daily devotion.
Joseph grew up, as he grew up, knowing that God had a purpose for him, that God had planned a destiny for him. My first point, experiencing God in the pit, the place of trouble. Point number 2, experiencing God in Potiphar's house. The third point, experiencing God in prison, the place of patience. Genesis chapter 39, verses 21 onwards. God's favor is established for Joseph even in the prison. God established favor for Joseph in the eyes of the jailer there. Close to 13 years Joseph is in prison. Close to 13 years. Imagine 13 years you're locked up in prison and still earning the favor of the superintendent, of your boss. 13 years means patience also for Joseph. And God is amazing in the way that God gives him the grace to endure all of this. And it is here Joseph's beautiful gift comes to bloom. What is it? The gift and the ability of translating or interpreting a dream for someone. Not a simple favor, but a godly favor. Joseph had nothing, but Joseph had everything. Joseph had his God. And that's what he says when someone comes to him to interpret a dream. Is it not God who interprets dreams? In other words, he's saying, you wise, you need to think that the God who I worship is the wise, the source of all wisdom, wise above wise, the King of kings. And that's what he said to them. This is a unique gift that only few possessed, and none of them could translate many times, and they come to Joseph in those days. God's favor rests upon Joseph even though his friends forget him. Even though his friend, who he depended on to say, when you go up to the king's palace, when you take my position that I was in, please remind the king. And the gentleman forgets about it. When he is prompted to high places, that gentleman forgot. But Joseph doesn't grieve. Joseph doesn't give up. He continues on to interpret dreams. In other ways, God's favor is established to Joseph even in the prison. And patience, character, and everything continues to excel in Joseph. In Galatians 6, chapter 6, verse 10, we read that Paul tells to do good. If you get a chance, do good for everyone, no matter who forgets you. Your life is not based on someone else's consequences. Because someone else did that to you, because you're in the prison, because this happened, because that happened, you could continue on with your complaints. But please note that God's favor was upon Joseph, even in the prison, can be established to you and to me too. Have patience and depend on God. If you're coming through this prison stage of life, God wants to remind you to have patience, and He will come through. With God, our gardener, the soil of adversity will nurture faith and bring forth life and beauty in its season. I want to say that again. With God, our gardener, the soil of adversity will nurture faith and bring forth life and beauty in its season. I want to move on to my last point. Experiencing God at the palace. Place of power. Joseph is recognized for this unique gift that God has gifted him, and he interprets the king's dream. But the interpretation is not just interpretation. Joseph goes ahead to deliver a nation by giving a solution to the interpretation too. Joseph's promotions brings him into power, fame, name, you name it, he gets it. But it did not make him any different than who he was way back when he was a young man. Way back then he knew in the depth of his heart and his mind that God had a plan for him, and he is fulfilling it all these years. And even as he comes to power, in his mind, Joseph knows for a certain fact that this is the God who's brought him this far, and these are the moments that God is fulfilling each and every promise that was given to him, each and every dream that was shown to him. When Joseph's power is seen, he is seen as someone who the nation can depend on. In Genesis chapter 41 verse 55, we see the king sending all people of all nations to go to Joseph. Nations will come and ask Joseph for provision, and Joseph will supply those to them. And the leadership role he held cannot fail. Otherwise, it would be a catastrophe. It's that large responsibility on his shoulders. And God's plan was Joseph would be dependent on God, so that when these responsibilities are given to his shoulder, he would be dependent for the people. Amazing, isn't it? If it was not for the pit, there is no Potiphar's house. If there is no Potiphar's house, there is no Potiphar's wife. If there is no Potiphar's wife, then there would be no prison. If there is no prison for Joseph, then there would be no situation required to interpret dreams. If there was no interpretation of dreams, there is no palace. There is no palace. Do you see how God weaves a beautiful story, and how Joseph learns to depend on this God in and through difficult various situations? The palace is not just a place of power and position for Joseph alone. It's fulfillment of God's plan for Joseph. That's why he reveals it to his brothers. Amazing, isn't it? You know, many of us, as we walk through difficulties, in some way, some situation, we may be in the pit situation, we may be in the Potiphar's house situation, or in the prison situation, or even in the palace situation. Somewhere along the line, we may be giving up. And you know what we are essentially doing? What God intended for a comma, our giving up can put it as a full stop. There is no full stop. In some ways, there is a comma. When God is done with this, yet what God intended for you, don't miss it out. Don't make a comma into a full stop in your life. I want to read this verse, Isaiah chapter 41, verse 13. For I, the Lord your God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you.
Dear listener, we are here to stand with you in your time of need. We want to pray with you and for your prayer request. Do you need someone to talk to? We are here for you. Call us or send a message at +91 636 425 2164. +91 636 425 2164. God bless you.